For most of my life so far, this was me. When I studied piano and voice in high school and college, I had a horrible relationship with practicing. A little more than 2 months ago, I stepped back from a tech job to focus on music again, and unfortunately found myself in the exact same place. In this video, I'll explore some tips I'm working on to make my practice these days more productive and way less frustrating. Let's roll the intro. Hey everyone, Ethan here. Welcome back to Plan B, a show where we find out together what it's like to go for your dreams. The good, the bad, and the ugly. There's some people I know who thrive on consistency, organization, and routine, for whom regular practice comes pretty easily. I tend to be the opposite, never interested in trapping myself into boring routines and happiest when I'm traveling. I am consumed by my passions, but they also tend to consume me, and I can't always control my hyperfocus. I'm pretty bad at sustaining habits and schedules, and while it's possible to navigate the adult world without these things, it's a pretty exhausting and miserable affair. A recent example of this problem for me is that I have a lot of good musical ideas waiting to become songs, but I feel that I'm continually held back by my inconsistent and shaky performance chops on a lot of instruments, which only consistent and effective practice can fix. Last week I discussed a mindset in education about practicing skills that I think harms more people than it helps. In this episode, I wanted to instead talk about practicing tips that I have found helpful. I'll be using music-focused examples here, but I think a lot of these points can apply more broadly too. Recently, for inspiration, I dove into a book I bought years ago but never bothered to actually read before, The Art of Practicing by Madeline Bruiser. I ended up loving its application of the principles of mindfulness, vulnerability, and radical compassion to a discipline usually dominated by tough love and grin and bear it mentalities. In this video, I'll be drawing heavily on some ideas in this book, as well as some of my own life experiences. And so now, without further ado, here are 3 principles of healthy practicing that I'm trying to work on right now. The first and most important point of all is to find a way to enjoy your mediocrity. One semester in college, I took a course on ancient Chinese philosophy and ethics taught by Professor Michael Puett. In the first lecture, he boldly asserted that if you take the ideas in this class seriously, they will change your life. Some kids were doubtful of his claim, but in the end, he was 100% right. Many of Professor Puett's ideas on the Analects, the Tao Te Ching, Zhuangzi, and more now live in my heart, but none more than his interpretation of Confucius's emphasis on the importance of rituals for self-betterment. As humans, we usually conceive of ourselves as having a fixed disposition with immutable strengths and immutable weaknesses. In the society that I'm familiar with, the educational system seems to be about identifying what we're naturally good at, honing those skills, and then parlaying them into one career we work at for our entire lives. According to Puett, Confucius's central idea was to challenge those notions. The self is less a preformed sculpture than a mound of clay, moldable, sculptable, capable of being cultivated throughout our lives. We would do well, therefore, to work on our weaknesses just as well as our strengths. When we've just started learning almost anything new, we're going to be bad at it. Most of our notions of effortless natural aptitude in our past are false memories. There is no significant self-improvement without struggle. Accepting the dominant idea of the fixed self at this stage inevitably leads to despair, because if you're bad at something, that just must be a part of who you are, so why try at all? Instead, we must keep in mind that we are working on ourselves and we can change. This struggle we must undergo is courageous in going against the societal grain. And in time, we can learn to not only settle into the uneasiness of mediocrity, but enjoy it while it lasts too. Madeline Bruiser references this in her book with the concept of beginner's mind from Zen Buddhism. In this early stage, we can choose to focus on the novelty of our new skill instead of forming constrictive ideas about it or investing our self-worth into it. We should approach it with childlike curiosity and wonder, with the security that there's no pressure on us right now. We're bad at it, we know that we're bad at it, and that can be liberating. As someone who has very little natural hand-eye coordination, I am terrible at basketball. I used to dread playing it in gym class when I was young because of the ridicule from my peers whenever I tried to take a shot. The inferiority complex I developed through this made me refuse to take part in even pickup games of ball sports with friends for years. In the past few years, though, in a friend group who really liked playing basketball, thank you Ezra, I started reluctantly taking part in games. And you know what? Because of how non-judgmental everybody was, every single time I really got into it and had a blast regardless of how good I was. Now, after a night out in the summer, pick up basketball with friends is a semi-regular pastime. This mentality can be learned for any activity. My next principle is that in practice, consistency is everything. For For my distractible brain, this is the biggest obstacle to durable learning, which is ironic because it's so simple to understand intellectually. On some level, everyone knows that whether it's playing the piano or riffle shuffling a deck of cards, you can't perform any complex physical task at full speed totally consciously. There needs to be some interaction with procedural or muscle memory, which is only developed through careful and spaced repetition. Of course, I know that you can't think your way through throwing a frisbee. I'm used to getting by without disciplined routines and to overloading my schedule though, so I'm always looking for shortcuts that may or may not exist to reduce preparation time for everything, and I don't always realize that this is the exact same thing. I'll spend 4 hours binge practicing a musical piece to be able to perform it once on camera when I probably could have done it in half the practice if I just spaced my preparation out over multiple days. In college, and this is seriously true, I wouldn't start studying for most of my semester end exams until midnight before the 9 a.m. deadline. I would then pull an all-nighter and cram all the material into my brain off the strength of a disgusting 5-hour energy shot, do decently on the test enough to not deter me from trying this again, and then instantly forget all of the material the day after. This all left me unhealthier and more ignorant than if I just bothered to figure out a studying schedule at the end of each semester. It's not worth it. The hard truth is that there is no magical shortcut for memory. Just as the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, the most efficient path to mastery is spaced out across multiple shorter sessions. If actually practiced consistently, skills often take much less time investment for improvement than you might expect if you're someone like me. In just the past 2 months, a 15 or 20 minute daily-ish vocal warm-up routine has done more for strengthening my mixed voice than I was able to accomplish with 4 years of previous disorganized practice. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm now able to get through things I wouldn't have dreamt of singing just this past August. Now, this does not mean you have to chain yourself to a routine if you really don't feel like it one day, a helpful point brought up in The Art of Practicing. By all means, take your rest days. Just know that if you find yourself forgetting things and making up for it with long, grueling sessions, something has probably gone wrong. And that actually brings me to my last point for today. Know when to stop. In the past, when I've been able to overcome my natural impatience and actually get down to working on improving my skills, my impulsive brain has still found another way to derail me by keeping me laser focused on my tasks past any reasonable point of diminishing returns. I'm talking hours and hours of drilling the same passage over and over again to iron out even small imperfections. When you get used to burning yourself out in each of your practice sessions like this, you naturally associate the thing that you are practicing with burnout, and you won't want to invest even small and healthy amounts of time in it. Even worse, this is how people get physically injured in sports and many other hobbies. If you feel physically fatigued or like something is beginning to hurt in your practice, you need to stop, do something else until that pain or fatigue goes away, and maybe fix your physical form so that this doesn't happen again. Beyond this, you should be proactively taking breaks regularly enough that this doesn't happen to you in the first place, either mentally or physically. In The Art of Practicing, while Madeline Bruiser says that people do differ in the optimal amount of time they should be concentrating between breaks, a good rule for most people might be taking a little break to recover after at most 45 minutes of concentrated practice. I'll admit that I have yet to actually live up to this, but I am working on it. Physical strain can get very obvious to recognize after enough time, but mental strain, I find, can build slowly enough that eventually you're too frustrated to properly recognize it. Here's a trick to catch it in the act, though. I find that broadly speaking, there are 2 types of stagnation when I'm practicing a complex physical task, such as performing a piece of music. The first I'm going to call regular stagnation, which is where you are pretty consistently screwing up one section of the task. This is not necessarily a product of mental fatigue and can maybe be addressed by briefly working on just that one section. The second I'll call irregular stagnation, which is where things are not going well, but you're screwing up something different every time for reasons it's hard to understand. This is mental fatigue in action and is a sure sign that you need a break. Now check out this video footage from when I was trying to perform a section of Clair Lune by Debussy for the intro to the 9th episode of Plan B 2 weeks ago. I'd memorized this whole piece over a decade ago, had spent a lot of time that day correcting problems with that old memory, and was getting tired, as you can see by the basic mistakes I was starting to make here. I'd gotten so many takes in here that I was almost running out of footage on my camera, and this is the point where I looked at the viewfinder, said, 3 minutes. And just took a second to regroup. Almost immediately, something clicked in my brain and I played the whole thing nearly note perfect. Crazily enough, a week later I found out that Madeline Bruiser describes a nearly identical experience in her book. There really is a power to taking a second to break and refocus. I have many more ideas on practicing, but I cannot fit anything else into this long video, so I have to stop here. I'd really recommend that anyone interested in these ideas pick up a copy of The Art of Practicing by Madeline Bruiser, because the author articulates many of these thoughts better than I possibly could. If you want to see more from me and maybe even hear my music, please subscribe or follow this channel, and don't forget to leave a comment if there's anything you want me to talk about in a future video. Thanks for watching, stay healthy, it is cold and flu season, and see you all next week.